The black Mercedes S-Class glided through the falling snow like a phantom. Inside, Marcus Barrett clutched the steering wheel with tension in his weathered hands, the wipers barely keeping pace with the thickening snowfall. Cedar Falls, Colorado appeared before him as little more than shadows through the white curtain of winter. The small town nestled in the Rocky Mountains was meant to be his final conquest before returning to Denver, another stepping stone in the expansion of Barrett Enterprises. "Listen, I don't care about the council meeting," Marcus barked into his Bluetooth earpiece, his voice filling the leather-lined interior. "The Evergreen Heights project breaks ground in 60 days period. Tell them it's non-negotiable." Through the windshield, Marcus could barely make out Main Street, lined with quaint shops and businesses that had served this community for generations. Soon, many would be demolished, replaced with luxury condominiums and high-end retail spaces. Progress, he told himself. Evolution. As his executive vice president continued talking, Marcus loosened his Italian silk tie. At 50, with salt and pepper hair and eyes hardened by decades of cutthroat business dealings, Marcus Barrett had built an empire from nothing. The son of a coal miner who had watched his father lose everything when the Windsor mines closed, Marcus had sworn never to be vulnerable again. Now his real estate development company ranked among the most aggressive and successful in the Western states. "Just make it happen, Victor," he concluded, ending the call as the Mercedes slid slightly on the increasingly treacherous road. The town looked eerily quiet, blanketed in snow that seemed to muffle more than just sound. It dampened ambition, progress, the very march of time. Marcus hated it instantly. His phone vibrated. "Michael," his son rarely called these days. Marcus answered with uncharacteristic eagerness. "Michael, how's Princeton treating you?" The cold silence lasted 2 beats too long. "I saw the press release about Cedar Falls." Michael's voice was tight with accusation. "Another small town for you to gut and rebuild in your image." Marcus closed his eyes momentarily. "Son, it's not that simple. These developments bring jobs, tax revenue. Save it. The last town you rescued lost its community center, its historical buildings, and half its population who couldn't afford your new paradise. Michael, don't call me anymore. I don't want anything to do with you or your business." The call ended abruptly, leaving Marcus staring at his phone screen. 3 months since they'd last spoken, and this was all his son had to say. The same son who once looked at him with admiration, who once proudly declared he wanted to be just like his dad. The dashboard clock on the Mercedes glowed 3:17 p.m. The Rolex Submariner on Marcus's wrist, his father's final gift before black lung disease claimed him, showed the same time. 2 reminders of time passing, opportunities, fading relationships crumbling. Snow was falling harder now. Marcus peered through the windshield, searching for any sign of Magnolia's Diner, where he was supposed to meet Victor Reynolds, his ruthless executive vice president, who had arrived in Cedar Falls the previous day to begin pressuring local businesses. The navigation system had failed 20 minutes ago, another victim of the rural mountain terrain. Through the whiteout, Marcus spotted a warm glow. A neon sign flickered bravely against the storm Magnolia's Diner. He turned the Mercedes into what he assumed was the parking lot, though the boundary between pavement and countryside had disappeared beneath 6 inches of snow. Inside Magnolia's, Emma Carson wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency, her movements economical after years of the same routine. At 38, her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face still pretty, but marked by years of quiet struggles and resilient determination. The snow had been falling steadily since dawn, and the diner had become a refuge for locals unable or unwilling to brave the worsening storm. "Emma, honey, bring old Frank another coffee when you get a minute," called Eleanor Johnson, the 72-year-old owner of Magnolia's. 3 generations of Johnsons had run this diner, serving as the beating heart of Cedar Falls through war, recession, and change. Eleanor moved more slowly these days, her hands slightly gnarled with arthritis, but her spirit remained undiminished. "Coming right up," Emma replied, already reaching for the coffee pot. She moved through the diner with familiarity, topping up cups, exchanging warm greetings with people she'd known her entire life. This place was more than a job. It was home in all the ways that mattered. The television mounted in the corner suddenly increased in volume as Sam, the elderly postman, turned it up. "Highway 70 is now closed due to multiple accidents," announced the weather reporter, her face grave. "State police are advising no travel whatsoever in Colorado's central mountain region. Several vehicles are reportedly stranded near Morgan Pass." Guess we're all staying put for a while, muttered Frank, a retired schoolteacher who had taught most of the adults in the diner. Good thing we're snowed in with Eleanor's peach cobbler. Emma smiled, but her eyes drifted to the window. The snow created a cocoon around magnolias, insulating them from the outside world. But for how long the tax bill Eleanor had received last week was still sitting under the register, the impossibly high figure threatening everything they all took for granted. Any word about the Barrett development? Asked Lily, the librarian who ran the small bookshop next door to Magnolia's. Eleanor's face tightened. They're sending some hotshot executive today, weather permitting, probably to tell me what I already know, that my property taxes have mysteriously tripled right when they want to buy the land. The diner fell momentarily silent. Everyone knew about Barrett Enterprises and their plans for Evergreen Heights, a luxury resort complex that would swallow half of Cedar Falls. The development promised jobs, but also threatened the very character of the town they loved. Emma refilled Frank's cup, remembering her grandmother working these same tables decades ago. She'd grown up in this diner, done homework in the back booth, celebrated birthdays, and mourned losses under this roof. After everything that had happened in Denver, returning to Cedar Falls and Magnolias had been her salvation. Her small apartment above the hardware store was nothing like the spacious condo she'd owned as a trauma nurse at Denver Memorial. But the place was filled with books on medicines she couldn't bear to part with, thriving plants rescued from clearance racks, in a peace she hadn't known was possible after what happened to Jake, her brother. Jake's framed photograph sat on her nightstand, his uniform crisp, his smile confident, before Afghanistan changed him forever. The Veterans Affairs Hospital in Denver had been his lifeline until it was acquired by a healthcare conglomerate and closed 6 months later for operational restructuring. Without proper treatment, Jake's PTSD had spiraled. He now lived in a specialized facility in Colorado Springs, the bills for which consumed most of Emma's savings. The bell above the diner door jingled, pulling Emma from her thoughts. Several heads turned, conversations pausing as they always did when strangers entered their tight-knit sanctuary. But no one entered. Instead, through the falling snow, Emma spotted a black Mercedes that had slid partially off the road. A man in an expensive overcoat was sprawled on the ice papers, and what looked like a leather portfolio scattered around him like autumn leaves. Without hesitation, Emma grabbed her coat from the hook near the kitchen. "Someone's fallen outside," she called to Eleanor, already pushing through the door into the brutal cold. The wind hit her like a physical force snow, immediately catching in her eyelashes. Emma moved carefully across the treacherous parking lot, her practical boots finding purchase where the man's city shoes had failed him. Marcus Barrett lay stunned on the ice, the breath knocked from his lungs, his back throbbing from the impact. Snow fell on his face, melting against his skin in an oddly intimate sensation. For a moment, he simply stared at the gray sky, disoriented, not just by the fall, but by the sudden silence. No phones ringing, no assistants hovering, no deals pending in those suspended seconds. "Hey, are you all right?" A woman's voice cut through his daze. Marcus turned his head to see a figure approaching, wisps of chestnut hair escaping from beneath a practical wool hat. Emma knelt beside the fallen stranger, her eyes quickly assessing him with the practiced efficiency of her nursing background. "Don't try to move too quickly," she advised, her voice calm but authoritative. That was quite a fall. Marcus found himself looking into warm brown eyes filled with genuine concern. When was the last time anyone had looked at him that way? Without agenda, without fear, without calculation. "I think I'm okay," he managed, though his back screamed in protest as he tried to sit up. "Just slipped." "The ice is treacherous today," Emma said, extending her bare hand to him. Marcus noticed her hands, immediately strong, capable, with short, practical nails and skin slightly roughened from work. So different from the manicured hands of the women in his usual circles. Her grip was surprisingly strong as she helped him to his feet. Marcus towered over her, but in that moment, he felt oddly diminished beside her calm competence. "Your papers are everywhere," Emma observed, already bending to gather the scattered documents. She moved with easy confidence on the ice while Marcus still felt unsteady. "Please, you don't have to," he began, but Emma was already collecting pages, tapping them into a neat stack. "It's no trouble," she said, then paused as she noticed the Barrett Enterprises logo on one of the documents. Her expression shifted subtly, a guardedness entering her eyes. "You're with Barrett." Marcus straightened his coat, reclaiming his executive posture despite the throbbing pain in his lower back. "Marcus Barrett," he said, extending his hand formally. "I own Barrett Enterprises." Emma's warm expression cooled noticeably. She handed him the stack of papers without comment, her eyes now assessing him in an entirely different way. "You should come inside and warm up," she finally said, her tone professional rather than friendly. "The roads are closed. No one's going anywhere for a while." Marcus glanced at his Mercedes, now visibly stuck in the snow. His meeting with Victor suddenly seemed very far away. "I suppose you're right," he conceded. As they made their way carefully toward the diner, Emma maintained a careful distance. "Those shoes aren't made for Colorado winters," she observed, glancing at his Italian leather Oxfords now soaked with snow and salt. "They're made for Denver boardrooms," Marcus replied, attempting a smile that felt stiff on his face. "I wasn't planning on an extended stay in Cedar Falls." "No one ever is," Emma said quietly, holding the door open for him. "Yet here we are." The warmth of Magnolia's diner enveloped Marcus like an embrace. The scent of coffee, baked goods, and something homey he couldn't quite identify transported him instantly to another time, his mother's small kitchen in Windsor, before everything fell apart. Conversations quieted as heads turned toward the newcomer. Marcus was accustomed to making entrances, to commanding attention in boardrooms and at charity galas, but this felt different. These gazes held no deference, only wary curiosity and, in some cases, unmistakable hostility. "Found him outside taking a tumble on the ice," Emma explained to the room at large, helping Marcus remove his snow-covered coat. "This is Marcus Barrett." The silence deepened. Eleanor Johnson straightened behind the counter, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Barrett," she repeated the name, hanging in the air like a challenge, "of Barrett Enterprises." Marcus nodded suddenly, feeling like he'd entered enemy territory without armor. "The very same." Frank, the retired teacher, exchanged glances with Sam. Lily from the bookshop clutched her coffee mug a little tighter. "Well," Eleanor finally said, her tone carefully neutral, "welcome to Magnolia's, Mr. Barrett. Weather's trapped quite a few folks today." Marcus recognized the careful diplomacy in her voice. He'd heard it countless times from small business owners and local politicians just before he presented terms they couldn't refuse. It was the voice of someone outmatched but maintaining dignity. "Thank you," he replied, matching her formality as Emma led him to the only available seat, a stool at the counter directly facing Eleanor. Emma moved behind the counter, exchanging a meaningful look with the older woman before reaching for a mug. "Coffee," she offered Marcus, already pouring the dark liquid. "Please," he said, noticing that conversations had cautiously resumed around him, though noticeably quieter. The television in the corner reclaimed attention as the news anchor reported, "Accidents have now completely blocked Morgan Pass. Emergency services are struggling to reach stranded motorists. The National Weather Service has upgraded this system to a winter storm warning with another 12 inches expected overnight." Marcus pulled out his phone to call Victor, but the no service indicator mocked him from the screen. Perfect. Trapped in a hostile diner in a town his company was about to transform with no way to contact his team. "Cell service gets spotty during storms," Emma explained, seeing his frustration. "Landline still works, though, if it's important." "It can wait," Marcus decided, wrapping his hands around the ceramic mug. The coffee was surprisingly good, rich and robust, without the pretentious flavors his personal barista insisted upon. Eleanor placed a menu before him. "Kitchen's still open if you're hungry. Snow days are always busy here." Marcus studied the laminated menu. Simple comfort foods, reasonable prices, nothing fancy or pretentious. When was the last time he'd eaten in a place like this, 20 or 30? "What do you recommend?" he asked, looking up at Emma, who was arranging silverware nearby. Something in her expression softened slightly. "Eleanor's beef stew is the best thing on a cold day. Comes with homemade sourdough bread." "Sold," Marcus said, closing the menu. He watched Emma relay the order to the kitchen, noting the easy familiarity between her and the older woman. Not just employees, family perhaps, or something like it. The diner's atmosphere gradually relaxed as the initial shock of his presence wore off. Marcus observed the interactions around him with growing curiosity. Frank and Sam argued good-naturedly about last night's basketball game. A young mother soothed a fussy toddler, while an elderly gentleman made silly faces to distract the child. Lily discussed a new book with a teenage girl whose blue hair contrasted with her shy demeanor. It was community in its purest form, something Marcus had long since forgotten in his rise to the top. "So you're the one buying up half our town," Eleanor said quietly, placing a glass of water before him. It wasn't a question. Marcus met her gaze directly. "I prefer to think of it as investing in Cedar Falls' future." Eleanor's laugh held no humor. That's a fancy way of saying you'll tear down buildings that have stood for 100 years to build condos most locals can't afford. Progress is inevitable, Marcus replied with practiced smoothness. Change comes to every community eventually. Progress, Eleanor repeated, testing the word like an unfamiliar flavor. Is that what happened to Windsor? Was that progress too? Marcus stiffened. Windsor, the mining town your company redeveloped 10 years ago. The one where the historical district mysteriously burned down after residents refused to sell. Marcus's face remained impassive, but internally he recoiled. The Windsor fire had happened during Victor's early days with the company. The investigation had found no evidence of wrongdoing, but rumors had persisted. That was an unfortunate accident, he said carefully. Barrett Enterprises had nothing to do with it. Convenient accident, Eleanor observed, wiping the counter with slow, deliberate movements. Just like it's convenient that my property taxes suddenly tripled right when your company became interested in Cedar Falls. Before Marcus could respond, the diner door burst open, bringing a gust of snow and bitter cold. Victor Reynolds stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the white storm brushing snow from his expensive overcoat. At 48, Victor was the perfect corporate predator, handsome in a severe way, with precision-cut dark hair and the hungry eyes of someone who measured his worth by what he acquired. The black leather briefcase he carried contained the contracts, threats, and promises that had helped Barrett Enterprises consume dozens of small communities across the West. Marcus, Victor called, spotting his boss at the counter. Thank God, I've been trying to reach you for hours. All eyes in the diner turned to the newcomer, the second intruder into their sanctuary in one day. Victor moved toward Marcus, his Italian shoes navigating the worn linoleum with distaste. His gaze swept the diner dismissively before focusing on his employer. The council meeting's been postponed because of the storm, but I've been making progress with individual property owners. His voice carried easily in the quiet diner, either oblivious to or unconcerned with the audience. Victor, Marcus said with a warning note, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Nonsense, Victor replied confidently. Everyone here knows why we're in Cedar Falls. No point in pretense. He placed his briefcase on the counter and popped it open, revealing neatly organized documents. I've secured preliminary agreements from the hardware store, the bakery, and 2 residential properties on Spruce Street. Emma, who had been retrieving Marcus's stew from the kitchen, froze. The hardware store Mr. Wilson agreed to sell. Victor barely glanced at her. Let's just say he understood the financial realities of holding out against inevitable development. Marcus noticed how Emma's knuckles whitened around the bowl she carried. The hardware store wasn't that where she'd said she lived. Here's your stew, Emma said, placing the steaming bowl before Marcus with controlled care, though he could sense the anger radiating from her. When you finished your meal, Victor continued, extracting a specific folder from his briefcase. We should discuss magnolias. Mrs. Johnson has been particularly resistant, but I think our updated offer might change her mind, especially given the tax situation. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the toddler seemed to sense the tension, her wide eyes moving between the adults. Eleanor straightened to her full-height dignity in every line of her body. You can save your breath, Mr. Reynolds. This diner isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Victor's smile never reached his eyes. Everyone has a price, Mrs. Johnson. It's just a matter of finding it. Not everyone, Emma interjected, her voice quiet but intense. Some things mean more than money. Victor finally turned his full attention to Emma, assessing her like he might a minor obstacle. And you are? Emma Carson, I work here. Well, Miss Carson, I suggest you start looking for alternative employment. One way or another, Magnolias will be part of Evergreen Heights by spring. He turned back to Eleanor. The property taxes alone will force your hand, Mrs. Johnson. Why not benefit from the inevitable? Marcus watched this exchange with growing discomfort. This was how business was done, how deals were made. He'd overseen hundreds of similar negotiations. Yet seeing it from this perspective, surrounded by the people whose lives would be upended by his company's progress, something felt different. Victor, Marcus said sharply, that's enough for now. Victor looked surprised but nodded deferentially. Of course, we have plenty of time to discuss details. The storm insurers were not going anywhere tonight. As if on cue, the lights in Magnolias flickered once, twice, and then stabilized. Power grid gets shaky in storms, Eleanor explained, her eyes still fixed challengingly on Victor. Might want to prepare for darkness, gentlemen. Charming, Victor muttered, closing his briefcase with a decisive click. Is there a hotel in this town, or are we expected to sleep in our cars? Cedar Inn at the end of Main Street, Emma provided, though I suspect they're fully booked with stranded travelers. Victor sighed dramatically. I'll see what I can arrange. We should touch base later, Marcus. With a curt nod, he departed, letting another blast of cold air into the diner as the door closed behind him. The tense silence lingered after Victor's departure. Marcus became acutely aware of being the enemy in their midst, the face of the corporation threatening their way of life. Your associate seems charming, Emma remarked, the sarcasm evident despite her even tone. Marcus took a spoonful of the beef stew, surprised by the rich, complex flavor. Victor is effective at what he does, he replied diplomatically. I bet he is, Emma said. Like a wrecking ball is effective at demolition. Several of the diner's patrons chuckled at this, the tension breaking slightly. Marcus continued eating, aware of being watched, but also increasingly aware of his surroundings. The diner's interior hadn't been updated in decades, worn booths, vintage chrome fixtures, a counter that had seen thousands of elbows. Yet there was something undeniably appealing in its authenticity. Photos lined the walls. Cedar Falls through the years, locals gathered for events, celebrations, memorials. One photo near the register caught his attention, a much younger Eleanor Johnson, standing proudly in front of Magnolia's on what appeared to be opening day. Beside her stood a tall man with his arm around her shoulders, his smile conveying unmistakable pride. My late husband, Thomas, Eleanor said, noticing Marcus's gaze. He was a miner before Black Lung took him. Built this place with his insurance money, so I'd have something after he was gone. Marcus felt an unexpected pang. His own father had died of the same disease, the coal dust progressively choking the life from his lungs after the Windsor mines closed and his healthcare coverage ended. I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus said quietly, the words feeling inadequate but sincere. Eleanor studied him with shrewd eyes that had seen decades of humanity at its best and worst. Been 30 years now. This diner was his legacy to me and mine to Cedar Falls. She glanced around the room at the people taking shelter from the storm. We feed folks who can't afford to pay sometimes, host the high school fundraisers, provide free meals to the homeless every Sunday. What do you suppose your Evergreen Heights will offer the actual people of Cedar Falls, Mr. Barrett? Before Marcus could answer, the diner door opened again. This time, a group of teenagers tumbled in, their faces red from cold snowboards propped against the outside wall. Miss Eleanor, one called, the power's out at school. They're sending everyone home. Well, you came to the right place, Eleanor replied, immediately shifting to grandmother mode. Find seats where you can. Emma will get you hot chocolate. The teens crowded around a booth, their youthful energy changing the atmosphere instantly. Marcus watched as Emma efficiently prepared a tray of steaming mugs, her movements graceful despite the cramped space behind the counter. You were a nurse, Marcus observed when she returned to refill his water glass. Emma looked startled. How did you know that? The way you checked me for injuries when I fell. Professional, methodical. The way you carry yourself. Marcus had built his fortune partly on his ability to read people, to identify their strengths and vulnerabilities. Emergency medicine, I'm guessing. Trauma nurse at Denver Memorial, Emma confirmed reluctantly. For 8 years. What brought you back to Cedar Falls? Something closed in Emma's expression. Life, she said simply. Sometimes it takes unexpected turns. Marcus sensed the boundary and respected it, turning his attention back to his meal. The stew was better than anything he'd been served at five-star restaurants recently, honest food without pretension. Outside, the snow continued falling, transforming Cedar Falls into a postcard winter scene. Inside Magnolia's, despite the presence of the man whose company threatened their future, the community adapted as they always had, sharing news, offering help, weathering the storm together. Emma watched Marcus Barrett from the corner of her eye as she served the teenagers their hot chocolate. His expensive suit looked out of place in Magnolia's, like a wolf in a henhouse trying to pass as another bird. Yet there was something in his eyes when Eleanor mentioned her husband's black lung disease, a flash of recognition, perhaps even pain, quickly masked. This was the man whose company had destroyed so many small towns like Cedar Falls, who had closed the VA hospital where Jake received treatment, whose wealth was built on the broken dreams of people like Eleanor. Emma had sworn she would never forgive Barrett Enterprises for what happened to her brother. Yet here was its founder eating Eleanor's stew at their counter, looking almost human. The lights flickered again, more persistently this time. After several seconds of struggle, they surrendered to the storm, plunging Magnolia's into sudden darkness. Exclamations of surprise filled the diner, followed by nervous laughter. Through the windows, Emma could see that the entire street had gone dark. Stay calm, everyone, Eleanor called. We have emergency lights and plenty of candles. We've weathered worse than this. Emma moved efficiently in the familiar space, locating the emergency lanterns stored beneath the counter. As she placed one on the counter near Marcus Barrett, their hands briefly touched. "Thank you," he said, his voice different somehow in the darkness, less the corporate titan, more the man who had fallen on the ice. The emergency lights cast long shadows through magnolias, transforming the familiar space into something almost mystical. Snow continued falling, outside visible now, only as ghostly movements against the darkened windows. "Looks like you might be stuck with us longer than you planned, Mr. Barrett," Emma observed, lighting candles along the counter. In the flickering light, Marcus Barrett's face seemed different. The hard lines of ambition softened the mask of corporate confidence, temporarily set aside. For just a moment, Emma glimpsed something unexpected in his eyes: uncertainty. "I'm beginning to think that might not be such a bad thing," he replied quietly. The television had died, with the power silencing the weather updates and emergency announcements. The diner felt suddenly isolated from the world, a small island of warmth and humanity in the growing storm. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen carrying more candles. "Power company says it could be hours or even days," she announced. "Anyone who needs a place to stay can bunk here. We have cots in the storeroom from the last big storm." Her eyes fell on Marcus, challenging him silently. Here was the community he threatened to destroy, offering him shelter in the same breath. "Now then," Eleanor continued, addressing the room at large, "who wants pie storm or no storm? We've got fresh peach cobbler, and it won't eat itself." A cheer went up from the teenagers in the corner booth. The mother with the toddler smiled gratefully. Even Frank and Sam perked up at the mention of Eleanor's legendary cobbler. "Pie, Mr. Barrett?" Eleanor asked, her tone making the simple question sound like a test. Marcus looked around the diner at the people gathered together, finding comfort in community. During the storm at Emma, organizing the teenagers to help distribute candles at the photographs documenting decades of shared lives. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Johnson," he replied, "and please call me Marcus." Eleanor nodded, the gesture somehow both acceptance and continued wariness. "Marcus it is then, for tonight at least." As Emma placed a slice of peach cobbler before him, Marcus caught her eye. "Thank you again for helping me outside. Not everyone would have." "I'm a nurse," Emma replied simply. "Was a nurse," she corrected herself. "Helping is what we do." "Even people you don't particularly like?" Marcus asked, his perceptiveness catching her off guard. Emma considered him in the candlelight, this man who represented everything threatening her home, yet who sat here now vulnerable to the same storm as the rest of them. "Especially them," she finally answered. "Sometimes they're the ones who need it most." The document that had fallen from Marcus's briefcase during his fall lay forgotten in Emma's coat pocket, a strategy memo outlining Barrett Enterprises' plan to pressure property owners through targeted tax increases arranged with the county assessor's office. Evidence of corruption she hadn't yet examined. Outside, the snow continued to fall, isolating Cedar Falls from the world beyond. Inside Magnolia's diner, Marcus Barrett, the man who had come to transform their town forever, ate Eleanor Johnson's peach cobbler by candlelight, surrounded by the very community he had planned to dismantle, unaware that the next 24 hours would change the trajectory of his life forever. Morning arrived in Cedar Falls with blinding brilliance. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed world. Pristine snow blanketed everything, softening the edges of buildings and burying vehicles under white mounds. Sunlight refracted off millions of ice crystals, turning the small town into a dazzling spectacle. Inside Magnolia's diner, Marcus Barrett woke with a groan. His back protested as he shifted on the narrow cot Eleanor had provided. The dining room had been transformed into an impromptu dormitory as the storm stranded travelers and locals alike. Around him, others were stirring, their breath visible in the chilly air. Power had not yet been restored. Marcus checked his Rolex, 6:15 a.m. In Denver, he would already be reviewing market reports, planning acquisitions, directing his empire from his penthouse office. Instead, he found himself reaching for his wrinkled shirt, wondering how he might find a hot shower in a powerless town. Emma emerged from the kitchen, already dressed and moving with quiet efficiency. She carried a large pot to the wood-burning stove in the corner, an antique that had suddenly become the diner's most valuable appliance. "Morning," she said, noticing Marcus was awake. "Coffee will be ready soon. It's not your Denver artisanal blend, but it'll be hot." "At this point, hot is all that matters," Marcus replied, his voice rough with sleep. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, aware of how disheveled he must look. When was the last time anyone in his professional circle had seen him without perfect grooming? Roads are still impassable. Emma continued stoking the fire in the stove. Plows are working, but it could be days before everything's cleared. Days. Marcus should have felt trapped anxious about the deals waiting in Denver, the meeting scheduled, the empire requiring constant attention. Instead, he felt an odd lightening as if the snow had temporarily buried his responsibilities along with his Mercedes. The diner door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Victor Reynolds looking remarkably put together despite the circumstances. He'd somehow managed to find accommodation at the Cedar Inn and appeared freshly showered, his shirt crisp, his expression determined. "Good news, Marcus," Victor announced, brushing snow from his overcoat. "I've arranged for a snowmobile to take us to the highway junction. From there, we can get a car to Denver." Emma paused in her work, a flicker of something relief disappointment crossing her face before she turned back to the stove. When Marcus asked, surprised by his own reluctance. 2 hours. Pack up whatever you need. We have that conference call with the investors at 4. Victor's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion, but a reminder of duty. Eleanor emerged from the back room carrying blankets. Despite the early hour and power outage, she looked composed, her white hair neatly pinned, her movements deliberate. Leaving so soon, she asked, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp. "Roads aren't safe yet. We have arrangements," Victor replied dismissively. "Barrett Enterprises doesn't stop for weather." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Marcus. "Coffee and breakfast before you go, at least. No sense facing the cold on an empty stomach." Before Marcus could respond, the diner door opened again. James Wilson, the elderly owner of the hardware store, limped in, his weathered face tight with barely controlled emotion. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, nodding to Eleanor before his eyes found Marcus. "Mr. Barrett, I'd like a word if you don't mind." The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Emma moved closer, concern evident in her stance. "Mr. Wilson," Victor interjected smoothly, "we've already discussed the terms for your property. The paperwork is being finalized." James Wilson stood straighter, his arthritic hands curled into fists at his sides. "That's what I want to discuss. I was visited by a county inspector yesterday morning before the storm hit. Suddenly, my building has code violations that would cost more than it's worth to fix." The old man's voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "Funny timing, wouldn't you say?" Marcus frowned and looking at Victor. This tactic wasn't new. Barrett Enterprises often worked with local officials to apply pressure where needed, but facing the human consequence was different from reading about it in a report. "Mr. Wilson served in war," Emma said quietly. "2 Purple Hearts. He's owned that store for 40 years. These concerns should be directed to the county inspector," Victor said smoothly. "Barrett Enterprises has no control over local code enforcement." "Bullshit!" James spat, his military bearing asserting itself. "This is the same playbook you used in Windsor and Lakeside, in every town Barrett swallowed up." Marcus rose from his cot, suddenly acutely aware of his rumpled appearance, in contrast to Victor's polished exterior. "Mr. Wilson, I understand your concerns." "You understand nothing," the old man interrupted. "That store was my life. Now I'm forced to sell in half what it's worth because your man here," he jabbed a finger toward Victor, "threatened that if I didn't take the offer, the code violations would bankrupt me." Others in the diner were awake now, watching the confrontation with somber faces. This was their future playing out before them. "I did no such thing," Victor said smoothly, but his eyes held a warning as they met Marcus's gaze. "Mr. Wilson misunderstood our conversation." "I may be old, but I'm not stupid," James retorted. "You told me, and I quote, 'The violations can disappear with the right signatures either on the inspection form or on our purchase agreement.'" Eleanor moved to James's side, placing a steadying hand on his arm. "James has never missed a mortgage payment in 40 years, she said to Marcus. "Now suddenly his building is unsafe, the same building where Emma and 4 other residents have apartments upstairs." Marcus felt a headache building behind his eyes. He'd approved the overall strategy for Cedar Falls, but the specific tactics were Victor's domain. "I'd like to see these violations," he said finally. Victor's face tightened. "Marcus, we have a schedule to keep. The snowmobile can wait." Marcus's tone left no room for argument. He turned to James Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, may I see your property?" The old man seemed surprised by the request but nodded cautiously. "Store's just down the street." "I'll come with you," Emma said, already reaching for her coat. The look she gave Marcus was unreadable, suspicious, curious, challenging. Victor stepped closer to Marcus, lowering his voice. "This is a waste of time. Everything's been handled according to company policy." "That's what concerns me," Marcus replied quietly. "I want to see for myself." The small group, Marcus, Emma, James, and a clearly annoyed Victor, made their way out into the brilliant morning. The cold was shocking after the relative warmth of the diner, the sunlight on snow, almost blinding. Main Street remained unplowed, though some residents had begun shoveling pathways. Marcus's Italian leather shoes, still damp from yesterday, immediately protested the cold. He walked carefully in the footsteps of the others, aware of his unsuitability for this environment. Wilson's Hardware occupied a sturdy brick building halfway down Main Street. The structure dated from the 1920s, solid craftsmanship evident in its proportions and details. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, slightly faded but well-maintained. "My father opened this store in 1952, James explained as he unlocked the front door. "I took over in '75 after coming home from war." The interior was exactly what a small-town hardware store should be. Shelves packed with practical necessities, the scent of metal and wood, and honest work permeating the air. Despite the power outage, enough sunlight streamed through the windows to illuminate the space. "Inspector said the electrical wiring is below code." James continued, leading them through the store. "Said the support beams in the basement are compromised. Said the roof needs complete replacement. Gave me 30 days to fix everything or face daily fines." Marcus examined the space with a practiced eye. He'd begun his career in construction before moving to development. "Show me the basement." With flashlights provided by James, they descended creaking stairs into the basement. Victor remained conspicuously silent, his face carefully blank. The basement revealed solid stone foundations typical of buildings from this era. Marcus examined the support beams, running his hand along the wood. "These are old-growth timber," he observed. "Better than anything you'd get today. I don't see any sagging or stress fractures." Emma watched him closely, her expression skeptical. "You know something about building construction?" Marcus nodded. "Started as a carpenter's apprentice at 16, worked construction through college." He moved to the electrical panel, opening it carefully. "This has been updated," he noted. "Modern circuit breakers properly labeled." "When was this done?" "5 years ago," James replied. "After the Johnson place had that electrical fire. I had everything brought up to code then." Marcus closed the panel, his expression darkening. He turned to Victor, who stood near the stairs, his posture rigid. "These violations are fabricated," Marcus stated flatly. "The inspector found them," Victor replied evenly. "We simply became aware of the situation." "Bullshit," Marcus said, echoing James's earlier sentiment. "The same inspector who suddenly raised property taxes on Magnolia's diner." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "You know about that?" "It's a common tactic," Marcus admitted, shame coloring his voice. "Create financial pressure, then offer relief through selling." Victor moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Marcus, this is not the place for this discussion. These are standard business practices in our industry. You approved the Cedar Falls strategy yourself." "I approved development, not extortion," Marcus replied, loud enough for the others to hear. To James, he said, "Mr. Wilson, I'd like to see these inspection reports." "Upstairs in my office," James replied, leading the way back up. As they climbed, Victor caught Marcus's arm. "What are you doing? This sentimentality is going to cost us millions. The investors—" "Will wait," Marcus cut him off. "Something doesn't feel right here, Victor, and I want to know why." James's office was a small room behind the main counter walls, lined with photographs spanning decades. James as a young soldier. James with his wife at the store opening, James with community members at various events. A life documented in service and belonging. The inspection report lay on the cluttered desk. Marcus picked it up, scanning the contents with growing anger. The violations were vague, the remediation requirements excessive, the time frame impossible. "This inspector," Marcus said, looking at the signature. "Carlton Myers, you know him?" "County building inspector for 15 years, James replied. "Never had a problem with him before last week." "And suddenly he finds thousands of dollars in violations," Marcus mused. "Right when Barrett Enterprises needs this property." Victor's phone chimed. He checked it, then looked up with forced urgency. "The snowmobile is waiting, Marcus. We need to leave now if we're going to make it back to Denver today." Marcus placed the report back on the desk, his decision crystallizing. "You go ahead. I'm staying." The room fell silent. Emma's eyebrows rose in surprise. James Wilson looked equally shocked. Victor's expression darkened dangerously. "What exactly do you mean you're staying?" Victor asked, his voice dangerously soft. "I'm staying in Cedar Falls." There are some things here I need to understand better for proceeding with Evergreen Heights. Marcus straightened, reclaiming the authority he'd temporarily set aside. Update the investors that I'm conducting an on-site review of the project. Reschedule what needs to be rescheduled. Victor's mask of corporate smoothness slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. This isn't like you, Marcus. Is it the fall? Did you hit your head? My head is clearer than it's been in years, Marcus replied. He turned to James. Mr. Wilson, with your permission, I'd like to review all the documentation related to these violations. And I'd like to know if other property owners have received similar notices. James Wilson studied Marcus warily, decades of experience making him cautious about sudden allies. Why the change of heart, Mr. Barrett? Yesterday you were here to finalize our demolition. A fair question. Marcus considered his answer carefully. Let's say I want to make sure everything about Evergreen Heights is above board. Completely legitimate. His eyes met Victor's as he spoke. The snowmobile won't wait forever, Victor warned, his tone making it clear this was about more than transportation. Then you'd better hurry, Marcus replied. Give my regards to the Denver office. The stare-down between the two men lasted several seconds. Corporate warfare conducted in silence. Finally, Victor nodded curtly. We'll discuss this when you return to Denver. The threat was implicit in every syllable. He turned and left his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. When the door closed behind Victor, Emma broke the tense silence. You're really staying? For now, Marcus confirmed, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. Something about these violations doesn't add up. A lot of things in Cedar Falls haven't added up since Barrett Enterprises came to town, she said pointedly. Then let's start adding them up correctly, Marcus replied. The walk back to Magnolia's was conducted in thoughtful silence, each person processing the unexpected development. The diner had come fully awake in their absence, the main room cleared of cots, locals gathering for breakfast, despite the continued power outage. Eleanor had the wood stove working overtime, serving simple but hearty food. Heads turned when Marcus entered, without Victor's speculation rippling through the crowd. Eleanor approached, coffee pot in hand. Your colleague left in quite a hurry, she observed, filling a mug for Marcus. Nearly knocked over Frank on his way out. He's headed back to Denver, Marcus explained, accepting the coffee gratefully. I'm staying for a while. Eleanor's expression revealed nothing, but her eyes assessed him with renewed interest. Any particular reason? Marcus sipped the strong coffee, considering his response. Let's just say I've seen some things that require further investigation. Such as why my property taxes suddenly tripled, Eleanor asked directly. Among other things, Marcus acknowledged. He looked around the diner at the faces watching their exchange people whose livelihoods and homes were threatened by his company, by his decisions. I'd like to talk to anyone else who's received unusual citations, tax reassessments, or pressure to sell in the past few months. Eleanor exchanged glances with several patrons. That would be most of Main Street, Mr. Barrett. Marcus, he corrected her, and I'd like to hear all of it. By midday, power had been restored to Cedar Falls, bringing warmth and light back to Magnolia's. Marcus sat in a corner booth surrounded by documents, inspection reports, tax assessments, letters from county officials. The pattern was undeniable and deeply troubling. Emma slid into the booth across from him, placing a fresh cup of coffee on the table. Finding what you expected, she asked, nodding toward the papers. Finding exactly what I was afraid of, Marcus replied grimly. He pushed several documents toward her. 12 businesses and 23 residential properties have received similar notices. All within the Evergreen Heights development zone, all within the past 3 months. Emma scanned the papers, her expression hardening. This is systematic harassment. It's more than that, Marcus said quietly. It's corruption. These officials are being influenced to target specific properties. He hesitated, then added, likely by Barrett Enterprises. Emma looked up sharply. Your company, your responsibility. The accusation stung precisely because it was true. Yes, Marcus admitted, though I didn't authorize these specific tactics. But you created the culture that made them possible, Emma challenged. You set the expectations for results without questioning the methods. Marcus couldn't argue with her assessment. For years, he'd focused on bottom lines, on expansion, on conquest. He'd left the details to men like Victor, maintaining plausible deniability about exactly how properties were acquired. You're right, he acknowledged, surprising himself with the admission. The responsibility ultimately falls to me. Emma studied him, searching for deception and finding none. So what happens now? You apologize and go back to Denver, leaving Victor or someone like him to continue the work. No, Marcus's voice hardened with conviction. Now I find out exactly how deep this goes, who's involved, and I stop it. Why, Emma demanded. Why suddenly care about Cedar Falls when you've bulldozed dozens of towns before us? Marcus considered the question, looking past Emma to the diner beyond. Eleanor chatted with customers while serving food. Teenagers crowded around a table laughing over shared jokes. Elderly couples held hands across tables they'd probably sat at for decades. Maybe I'm tired of bulldozing, he said finally. Maybe falling on the ice yesterday knocked some sense into me. His attempt at humor fell flat against Emma's skepticism. People don't change overnight, she said flatly. No, Marcus agreed, but sometimes they can start to see clearly overnight. He hesitated, then decided to share the truth. My father was a miner in Windsor. When the mines closed, he lost everything: his job, his pension, eventually his health. We watched as developers came in promising revitalization, but delivering gentrification that forced out everyone who'd built the town. Emma's expression softened slightly. Windsor, that's why you reacted when Eleanor mentioned it. Marcus nodded. I swore I'd never be vulnerable like my father was. I'd be the one with power, with control. He gestured to the documents. Somewhere along the way, I became exactly what I once hated. The road to redemption is longer than one day of enlightenment, Emma warned, though her tone had lost some of its edge. I know, Marcus acknowledged, but it has to start somewhere. He sorted through the papers, extracting several key documents. I need to understand exactly how this operation works, who's being paid, and where the pressure points are. Emma considered him for a long moment. There's someone you should meet, she said finally. Someone who's been tracking Barrett Enterprises' activities in Cedar Falls for months. A journalist. A historian. Lily from the bookshop. She's been documenting everything: the property acquisitions, the official decisions, the pattern of development. She has a PhD in urban planning from Cornell, but came home to care for her mother. And she runs the bookshop, Marcus mused, where Victor claims to have secured a purchase agreement. Emma's expression confirmed his suspicion. Another fabrication. Let's ask her, Emma suggested, rising from the booth. She's usually at the shop by now, power or no power. They bundled up against the cold, stepping out into a Cedar Falls transformed by winter but slowly returning to life. Residents shoveled sidewalks. Children built snowmen. Utility crews worked to restore power to outlying areas. The simple resilience of community surrounded them. The bookshop occupied a charming Victorian building next to the hardware store. Chapters in verse read the sign above the door, accompanied by a painted image of an open book with mountains rising from its pages. Inside the shop was a book lover's dream, shelves reaching to the ceiling, comfortable reading nooks tucked into corners, the scent of paper and binding glue and possibilities. Gas lamps provided warm light in the areas away from windows, giving the space a timeless quality. Lily looked up from the counter where she was updating inventory by hand in the absence of computer power. In her early 40s, with auburn hair streaked with premature silver and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, she radiated competence and wariness in equal measure. Emma, she greeted warmly before her gaze shifted to Marcus. Her expression cooled noticeably. Mr. Barrett. Lily, Emma said, approaching the counter. Marcus is trying to understand what's been happening with the county inspections and tax assessments. I thought you might be willing to share your research. Lily's eyebrows rose. My research with the man whose company is orchestrating the whole operation. I understand your skepticism, Marcus said, stepping forward, but I've just discovered some concerning patterns in how properties are being acquired in Cedar Falls. Victor Reynolds claims to have secured a purchase agreement with you, but I'm guessing that's not true. Not even remotely. Lily confirmed, her posture relaxing slightly. Though he did threaten that my mother's care facility would suddenly find reason to terminate her residency if I didn't sell. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, shame washing through him. I'm sorry, that's completely unacceptable. Yes, it is, Lily agreed coolly. Why the sudden concern for ethics, Mr. Barrett? Your company's reputation precedes you. I'm discovering that Barrett Enterprises' methods have evolved beyond what I authorized, Marcus replied carefully. I want to understand the full scope of what's happening here. Lily studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. Follow me, she said, leading them past the main shop floor to a door marked private. The back room served as both office and research center. One wall was covered with a large map of Cedar Falls properties, color-coded according to status. Red pins marked properties already acquired by Barrett Enterprises or its shell companies. Yellow pins indicated properties under pressure. Green remained free of Barrett influence. The red was spreading like a bloodstain across the map. Impressive, Marcus murmured, taking in the detailed visualization. I started tracking acquisitions 6 months ago when the first Barrett Shell Company appeared on county records, Lily explained. At first it seemed like random purchases, but then a pattern emerged. She pointed to clusters of red pins. They're creating islands of ownership surrounding key properties and cutting them off. Classic siege tactics. Marcus recognized the strategy. It was one Barrett Enterprises had refined over years. Isolate holdouts, apply pressure from all sides, create an environment where selling became the only viable option. And here, Lily continued, moving to a corkboard covered with documents, is where it gets interesting. She tapped a series of papers. County Commissioner Wesley Grant has received over $50,000 in consulting fees from Evergreen Ventures, LLC, a shell company owned by Barrett Enterprises. How did you get this information? Marcus asked, impressed despite himself. Freedom of Information Act requests, public records, searches, and good old-fashioned small-town gossip, Lily replied with a hint of pride. Commissioner Grant's nephew works at the bank and has concerns about his uncle's ethical choices. Emma moved closer to the display. You think Grant is influencing the tax assessments and inspections? I know he is, Lily confirmed. He has direct authority over the county assessor's office and the building inspection department. Both Carlton Myers, who's been targeting the hardware store, and Richard Porter, who tripled Eleanor's property taxes, were appointed by Grant. Marcus absorbed this information with growing anger. Barrett Enterprises using influence was one thing that happened in development projects everywhere. But this level of coordinated harassment crossed legal and ethical lines. There's more, Lily said, opening a file drawer and extracting a thick folder. After the Windsor fire, I started looking into other Barrett developments. There's a pattern of convenient disasters befalling holdout properties. She spread photographs across her desk, charred remains of buildings, collapsed roofs, flooded basements. All ruled accidental or due to natural causes, all happening within weeks of final acquisition deadlines. The implication hung in the air between them. Marcus felt physically ill. You think Barrett Enterprises is responsible for these? I think someone working for Barrett Enterprises arranges for problems to occur, Lily clarified. Someone who delivers results without asking too many questions. Victor, Marcus whispered, the pieces falling into place. Victor Reynolds, who had joined the company right before the Windsor fire. Victor, who consistently delivered successful acquisitions in record time. Victor, whose methods Marcus had deliberately avoided examining too closely. Why are you showing me this? Marcus asked Lily. You have enough here to go to the FBI, or at least the state attorney general. I've considered it, Lily acknowledged, but development isn't illegal. Political influence isn't always illegal, and accidents are hard to prove otherwise. She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. Besides, I wanted to gather more concrete evidence before making accusations against one of the most powerful development companies in the western states. And now, Marcus prompted, now you're here asking questions I never expected you to ask, Lily replied thoughtfully, which makes me wonder what your real agenda is. A fair question. Marcus considered how to answer, aware that his reputation made any claim of sudden ethical awakening sound hollow. I built Barrett Enterprises to create value, to transform stagnant properties into thriving developments, he said finally. Somewhere along the way, the means became more important than the ends. I ignored how we were achieving our goals as long as the results satisfied investors. He gestured to the evidence wall. This isn't development, it's predation, and I need to stop it. Lily exchanged glances with Emma's silent communication passing between them. If you're serious, Lily said carefully, then there's something else you should see. She unlocked a cabinet and withdrew a final folder, this one sealed. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous package containing internal Barrett Enterprises documents. Strategy memos, emails, financial records, all relating to the Cedar Falls acquisition. Marcus frowned. A whistleblower. Possibly, Lily agreed. The materials outline the complete Cedar Falls strategy, including which officials to target for influence, which properties to pressure first, and contingency plans for dealing with problem holdouts. She handed Marcus the folder. He opened it with growing dread, recognizing the internal document format immediately. The first page contained a project overview titled Cedar Falls Acquisition Strategy, marked confidential and bearing the Barrett Enterprises logo. As he read through the document, Marcus's expression hardened. The strategy explicitly outlined using regulatory pressure, targeted tax increases, and enhanced persuasion techniques for properties that refused initial offers. Even more disturbing was the section on contingency removals, a euphemism for forcing people out by any means necessary. This document never crossed my desk, Marcus said quietly, though he recognized elements of his company's standard acquisition playbook grotesquely evolved into something predatory. It has your digital signature on the approval page, Lily pointed out, turning to the last sheet. Marcus examined the signature. It looked authentic, but I never saw this document, he insisted, but it appears someone wanted it to look like I did. Victor, Emma suggested. Possibly, Marcus agreed, troubled by the implications. But this raises larger questions about what else has been done in my name without my knowledge. The bell above the bookshop door jingled, announcing a customer. Lily quickly gathered the sensitive materials, returning them to their cabinet. We should continue this discussion elsewhere, she suggested. Too many ears in a small town. Marcus nodded, his mind racing with implications and possibilities. If Victor had falsified his approval on Cedar Falls, what else might he have done? And how deeply was Barrett Enterprises compromised by these tactics? As they prepared to leave through the back door, Emma touched Marcus's arm lightly. If what you're saying is true, if you really didn't authorize these methods, then someone has been using your company for their own purposes. The question is, what are you prepared to do about it? Marcus met her gaze directly. Whatever is necessary, he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. Beginning with Cedar Falls. They stepped out into the alley behind the bookshop, the brilliant winter sun momentarily blinding them. When Marcus's vision cleared, he found himself face to face with James Wilson, the hardware store owner who was removing snow from his back entrance. The elderly veteran straightened, leaning on his snow shovel. Making progress, Mr. Barrett, he asked, nodding toward the bookshop. Beginning to, Marcus replied honestly. Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology. The tactics being used against your business are unconscionable. James studied him, decades of hard-earned wisdom evident in his weathered face. Apologies are easy, Mr. Barrett. Actions matter more. You're absolutely right, Marcus agreed. Which is why I'd like to start by having a structural engineer, one not connected to the county or Barrett Enterprises, examine your building and provide an independent assessment of its condition. James's eyebrows rose in surprise. And if this engineer confirms what I already know, that there's nothing wrong with my building, then we address why Inspector Myers claimed otherwise, and who instructed him to do so, Marcus said firmly. James considered this, then extended his hand. I served with a man named Barrett in war, William Barrett. Any relation? Marcus accepted the handshake, the older man's grip still powerful despite arthritis. My Uncle Bill, my father's younger brother. Good man, saved my life at Quezon, James said simply. For his sake, I'll give you the chance to prove you're cut from the same cloth. As their hands separated, a sharp crack echoed through the alley. For a confused instant, Marcus thought it was a car backfiring on Main Street. Then the brick wall beside them exploded in a spray of red dust and fragments. Get down! James shouted, his combat training instantly asserting itself as he tackled both Marcus and Emma into the snow. A second shot whined overhead, striking the metal drainpipe with a piercing ding. Someone's shooting at us, Emma gasped, her face pressed into the snow. Not someone, Marcus replied grimly. Someone who doesn't want us looking too closely at Barrett Enterprises' operations in Cedar Falls. As they huddled in the snow, sirens wailed in the distance. The peaceful winter morning had shattered, along with any doubt that Marcus Barrett's investigation had struck a dangerous nerve. The battle for Cedar Falls had just become deadly serious. The Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department wasn't accustomed to investigating shootings. Sheriff Dave Miller, a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen 40 years of small-town troubles, examined the bullet hole in the brick wall behind Wilson's Hardware with the gravity it deserved. This wasn't some hunter's stray shot, he concluded, carefully extracting the bullet fragment. This was deliberate. Marcus, Emma, and James Wilson stood nearby, still shaken by their brush with violence. Yellow police tape cordoned off the alley, and curious onlookers gathered at both ends, whispers spreading through the tight-knit community. Any ideas who might want to take a shot at a hardware store owner, a waitress, and a visiting businessman? Sheriff Miller asked, his tone conversational, but his eyes sharp. Marcus stepped forward. I believe I was the target, Sheriff. There are people who don't want me looking too closely at certain business practices in Cedar Falls. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. That's so. And what business practices would those be? Mr. Barrett, the ones your company's been using to pressure folks into selling. The direct accusation caught Marcus off guard, though it shouldn't have. In a town this size, the sheriff would know exactly what was happening to his community. Yes, Marcus admitted, though I'm discovering that my company's methods here have gone far beyond what I authorized. Sheriff Miller studied him skeptically. Convenient timing for that realization. Dave, James Wilson interjected, he's trying to help. Someone just took shots at him for it. Or this is an elaborate ploy to gain trust, the sheriff countered. Wouldn't be the first time a corporation staged something for sympathy. Emma stepped forward. I was skeptical too, Sheriff. Still am to some extent. But Marcus has spent the morning uncovering evidence of corruption involving Barrett Enterprises and county officials. The sheriff's expression shifted slightly. Wesley Grant. Marcus nodded. Among others, you suspect him too. Let's just say the county commissioner's new boat and vacation home raised some eyebrows on a public servant's salary, Miller replied dryly. But suspecting and proving are different matters. We have documentation, Marcus said, payment records from a Barrett shell company to Grant and others. Sheriff Miller's professional demeanor remained unchanged, but something kindled in his eyes. That's so, I'd be interested in seeing those records. He pocketed the bullet fragment carefully. In the meantime, I suggest you three watch your backs. Whoever fired these shots wasn't making a friendly warning. As the sheriff walked away to speak with his deputies, Marcus turned to Emma and James. We need somewhere secure to continue our conversation with Lily, somewhere not obvious. My place, Emma suggested, above the hardware store. Not many people know I live there. James nodded in agreement. Good thinking. I'll get Lily and meet you upstairs. Use the back entrance. As they carefully made their way through the hardware store to the stairs leading to the apartments above, Marcus found himself in unfamiliar territory, not just physically but emotionally. For decades, he had been the one wielding power, the one others feared. Now he was dodging bullets, relying on the protection of people whose lives his company had threatened. Emma's apartment was small but warm, filled with books, plants, and simple, comfortable furniture. Medical textbooks lined one shelf while framed photographs occupied another. Marcus noticed a prominently displayed photo of a young man in military uniform, his resemblance to Emma unmistakable. Your brother, he asked quietly. Emma nodded, a shadow crossing her face. Jake, 2 tours in Afghanistan, came home with wounds you couldn't see. She busied herself making coffee, avoiding further conversation about her brother. James arrived minutes later with Lily, who carried her research materials in a worn leather messenger bag. The hardware store owner locked the door behind them, checking windows with the vigilance of a man who had once survived combat. I called in some favors, James announced. Got friends watching the street? Nobody's getting close without us knowing. Buddies, Marcus asked. James nodded. Some of them, others are just good people who care about this town. The four gathered around Emma's small dining table, spreading out Lily's documents. The historian had brought everything: property records, payment trails, inspection reports, and the damning internal Barrett Enterprises materials. If what you're saying is true, Mr. Barrett, Lily began, and you didn't approve these tactics, then someone in your organization has gone rogue, possibly with the help of others. Victor Reynolds, Marcus confirmed, though I doubt he's acting alone. This level of operation would require board support or at least their willful ignorance. The question is what you intend to do about it, Emma said, placing mugs of coffee before each of them. Walk away, damage control, or actually fix the problem. Marcus met her gaze directly. I intend to make this right, not just for Cedar Falls, but for every community where Barrett Enterprises has operated this way. That's a bold claim, Lily observed. It could cost you your company. Perhaps it should, Marcus replied, surprising himself with the admission. If Barrett Enterprises can only succeed through corruption and intimidation, then maybe it doesn't deserve to succeed. James Wilson leaned forward, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug. What exactly are you proposing, Barrett? Marcus took a deep breath. First, we document everything and create an airtight case against Victor and the corrupt officials. Second, I use my authority as CEO to halt the Cedar Falls acquisition immediately. Third, I make restitution to everyone who's been harmed. And after that, Emma pressed. After that, I take the evidence to the State Attorney General and the FBI, Marcus stated, even if it means implicating myself. A heavy silence fell over the table. These people had no reason to trust him, every reason to doubt his sincerity. Yet the simple fact remained someone had tried to kill him. That lent credibility to his claimed conversion. You'd risk prison, James asked bluntly. If necessary, Marcus confirmed, though I suspect a plea deal could be arranged in exchange for testimony. He smiled grimly. I'm still a businessman after all. The ringing of Marcus's phone shattered the moment. He glanced at the screen, Victor Reynolds. With a significant look at the others, he answered, putting the call on speaker. Marcus, Victor's voice came through smooth as ever, but with an undercurrent of tension. I'm hearing concerning reports from Cedar Falls. Something about gunshots and police. News travels fast, Marcus replied neutrally. Someone took a couple shots at me after I started asking questions about our acquisition methods. A brief pause. How unfortunate. Are you all right? Fine, thank you for your concern. I'm more interested in why someone would want to stop my investigation. Another pause, longer this time. Investigation is a strong word, Marcus. I thought you were simply reviewing the project details. The details include bribing county officials and fabricating building code violations, Marcus said evenly. Possibly even arranging accidents for property owners who won't sell, those kinds of details. The silence that followed was profound. When Victor spoke again, his voice had hardened. You're making serious accusations without evidence. That's not like you, Marcus. Perhaps the stress of recent events has affected your judgment. My judgment is clearer than it's been in years, Marcus replied. Clear enough to see what's been done in my name with or without my knowledge. I see. Victor's tone shifted to something almost regretful. That's disappointing to hear. The board was concerned about your behavior, but I defended you. Said you just needed time. The board, Marcus asked sharply. You've spoken to the board about me. Of course. When the CEO suddenly abandons an investor call to play small-town hero, it raises concerns. They've called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Victor's voice regained its confident edge. I suggest you return to Denver immediately to defend your position, unless you're ready to step down. The threat was unmistakable. Marcus glanced at the others around the table who were listening intently. I'll be there, Marcus said finally, with documentation that will interest not just the board, but federal authorities. Don't threaten me, Marcus, Victor's voice dropped dangerously low. You built this company using the same methods you're now condemning. The board knows it. I know it. The only difference is that now you're having a convenient moral awakening when it might save your reputation. The accusation struck uncomfortably close to home. Marcus had indeed looked the other way for years, caring about results rather than methods. That truth gave Victor's words their sting. Perhaps you're right, Marcus conceded, surprising Victor with his candor. But that doesn't change what's happening now. I'm ending this, Victor, one way or another. You're making a serious mistake, Victor warned, one that will cost you everything. No, Marcus replied with quiet certainty. My mistake was forgetting what matters. I won't make that one again. He ended the call looking up to find 3 pairs of eyes watching him intently. Well, James said after a moment, sounds like you've burned your bridges. Some bridges need burning, Marcus replied. The question now is whether I can get to Denver and present my case before Victor and the board outmaneuver me. Lily tapped her fingers thoughtfully on a stack of documents. The roads to Denver should be clear by tomorrow morning, but if Victor was behind the shooting, traveling alone would be risky. I'll go with you, James Wilson volunteered unexpectedly. Been a while since I've seen the big city. Emma and Lily exchanged glances. We'll all go, Emma decided. Safety in numbers. Besides, I have some personal business with Barrett Enterprises regarding my brother's VA hospital. Marcus looked at these 3 people, virtual strangers 24 hours ago now, risking their safety to help him right a wrong. It was humbling in ways he hadn't experienced in decades. Thank you, he said simply. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. They organized the evidence, made copies, secured the originals in multiple locations. Sheriff Miller, informed of their plans, agreed to provide an escort to the highway. Not because I fully trust your conversion, Barrett, he clarified gruffly, but because Dave Grant has needed taking down for years. As evening fell, Marcus found himself alone with Emma on her small balcony. The temperature had dropped with the sun, but the air was clear, stars emerging in a crystalline sky above Cedar Falls. Below, Main Street glowed with warm light from shops and homes, people moving about their evening routines despite the disruption of the storm and the shooting. It's beautiful, Marcus observed quietly. Peaceful. Worth saving, Emma agreed, her breath visible in the cold air. Marcus nodded. I see that now. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling him. You mentioned your brother was treated at a VA hospital that Barrett Enterprises acquired and closed. Was that in Denver? Emma's expression tightened. Yes, the Westside Veterans Medical Center. Your company purchased it, promised modernization, then shuttered it 3 months later. The patients were redistributed to facilities across 3 states. Her voice caught slightly. Jake was making progress there. Had doctors who understood his PTSD. After the closure, he spiraled. Now he's in a facility that costs twice as much and provides half the care. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, the weight of another unintended consequence settling on his shoulders. I remember that acquisition. The board presented it as underperforming real estate with redevelopment potential. I never... He stopped himself. No, that's not true. I never asked about the human impact. I saw the property value, not the purpose it served. That's the problem with seeing the world as assets and liabilities, Emma said, not unkindly. People become numbers on a spreadsheet. I want to make it right, Marcus said, not just with Cedar Falls, but with your brother, with everyone affected by these decisions. Emma studied him in the dim light. Why now after all these years? Marcus considered the question carefully. Yesterday, when I slipped on the ice for a moment as I fell, I saw myself clearly, a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. Money, power, possessions, but no real connections. No purpose beyond accumulation. He gestured toward the town below. Then you helped me up, not because of who I am or what I could do for you, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Basic human decency isn't that remarkable, Emma observed. It shouldn't be, Marcus agreed. But in my world, it's become rare. Everything has an angle, a price, a calculation. He touched the Rolex on his wrist, his father's last gift. My father warned me about this before he died. Said success wasn't worth achieving if you lost yourself in the process. I didn't understand then. I do now. Emma was silent for a long moment. Redemption isn't a single moment, Marcus. It's a choice you make every day, especially when it's difficult. I know, he acknowledged. This is just the beginning. Their conversation was interrupted by James calling from inside. Barrett, you need to see this. They returned to find James and Lily huddled around a laptop. On screen was a breaking news story. Barrett Enterprises CEO Marcus Barrett suspended pending investigation. They're moving faster than we anticipated, Lily observed grimly. The board has suspended you citing erratic behavior and potential mental health concerns. Marcus felt a cold fury building as he read the statement. Victor wasted no time. This was his contingency plan all along: discredit me if I ever became a threat. It gets worse, James added, scrolling down. They've frozen your corporate accounts and access. Effectively, you're locked out of your own company. Marcus absorbed this blow, then surprised himself by laughing. They think that will stop me. I built that company from nothing. I know where all the bodies are buried, literally in some development cases. Do you have resources they can't touch? Lily asked practically. Marcus nodded. Personal accounts, investments separate from Barrett Enterprises. And something more valuable: knowledge of every acquisition, every deal, every shortcut we've taken over 20 years. So what's our next move? Emma asked. We stick to the plan, Marcus decided, but accelerate the timeline. I need to make some calls tonight, people who still owe me favors, who might stand with me against the board. And if that doesn't work, James pressed. Marcus's expression hardened with resolve. Then I'll tear down everything I've built to make this right. Dawn found them preparing to depart for Denver. Marcus had spent much of the night on Emma's phone calling former allies, making arrangements. Some calls went well, others ended in disappointment. By morning, he had a clearer picture of where he stood, largely alone against the Barrett Enterprises board, but with a few crucial supporters. 4 vehicles assembled outside Wilson's Hardware. Marcus's snow-covered Mercedes, now dug out and serviced by the local garage, James's sturdy pickup truck, Sheriff Miller's patrol car, and a county snowplow to lead them through any remaining drifts. Quite the convoy, Eleanor Johnson remarked, arriving with thermoses of coffee and bags of breakfast sandwiches. Never thought I'd see the day I'd be helping Marcus Barrett. Never thought I'd be working to stop my own development, Marcus replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Eleanor fixed him with a penetrating gaze. You really believe you can make this right, undo all the damage? Not all of it, Marcus admitted. Some things can't be undone. But I can stop it from continuing, make amends where possible, and ensure those responsible face consequences. Eleanor nodded slowly. Good enough, I suppose. Just remember who you're fighting for. I won't forget again, Marcus promised. As they prepared to depart, a final visitor arrived, Lily's research assistant, a young man with earnest eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He hurried up to the group, clutching a manila envelope. Found it, Dr. Phillips, he announced triumphantly, handing the envelope to Lily. Buried in the county archives like you suspected. Lily opened the envelope, examining the contents with growing excitement. This is it, she confirmed. The original development proposal for Windsor dated 3 weeks before the fire that destroyed the historical district. It specifically identifies those buildings as obstacles to the project and suggests alternative solutions might be necessary. Marcus took the document, his hands trembling slightly as he recognized the implications. This directly links Barrett Enterprises to the Windsor fire, the same pattern we've seen repeated in other communities. Including the one where my father lost everything, James Wilson added quietly, where your father lost everything too. Marcus carefully returned the document to its envelope. This may be the most important piece of evidence we have. It establishes a pattern going back years. With the convoy assembled and evidence secured in multiple locations, they prepared to depart. Sheriff Miller approached Marcus for a final word. Barrett, I'm still not entirely convinced about your change of heart, he said frankly. But I've been in law enforcement long enough to know that people can surprise you for better or worse. Just know that if this is some elaborate corporate maneuver, you'll answer to me personally. Fair enough, Marcus replied, extending his hand. The sheriff accepted it with a firm grip. The journey to Denver passed without incident, the Colorado landscape transformed by snow into something primeval and pure. Mountains rose around them, indifferent to human concerns, while valleys nestled communities like Cedar Falls, places with histories, connections, purposes beyond their real estate value. Marcus rode with Emma, the hours giving them time to further develop their strategy and to learn more about each other. She spoke of her years as a trauma nurse, of patients saved and lost, of her brother's struggles after Afghanistan. Marcus shared stories of his early days in construction, of lessons learned from his father, of the gradual hardening of his values as success. Bred success. When did it change for you? Emma asked as Denver's skyline appeared on the horizon. When did developments become about maximizing profit rather than building communities? Marcus considered the question thoughtfully. There wasn't one moment. More a series of compromises, each seemingly small at the time. A cheaper material here, a zoning variance there. Gradually, the bottom line became the only line that mattered. And now, Emma pressed, now I see the true cost of those compromises. Marcus replied, his gaze fixed on the approaching city. And I can't unsee it. The Barrett Enterprises headquarters dominated a prime block in downtown Denver, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that reflected the surrounding buildings and the mountains beyond. As their vehicles approached, Marcus studied his corporate home with new eyes, seeing not just its impressive architecture, but what it represented. Power divorced from purpose, profit separated from people. Security guards watched warily as the convoy pulled into the private parking area. Marcus's access badge still worked. Apparently someone wanted him to enter the building. Emma, James, and Lily accompanied him, each carrying portions of their evidence in innocuous bags and briefcases. In the lobby, heads turned as Marcus Barrett, looking decidedly less polished than usual in clothes borrowed from James Wilson, strode toward the executive elevators. The security desk called up immediately, and by the time they reached the top floor, a welcoming committee awaited them. Victor Fader Reynolds stood at the forefront, flanked by 2 security officers and several board members. His smile was practiced, his stance relaxed, but his eyes were cold with calculation. Marcus, he greeted smoothly, we've been concerned about you. After your episode in Cedar Falls, the board thought it best to give you some time to seek help. Very thoughtful, Marcus replied, equally smooth. I've brought some friends to the board meeting. I believe they have information that will interest everyone. Victor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The board meeting is for members only, I'm afraid. Your visitors can wait here. Actually, came a new voice from behind Victor. I'd like to hear what they have to say. Rebecca Barrett, Marcus's ex-wife, and a significant shareholder, emerged from the boardroom. At 53, she remained striking, silver-streaked dark hair, framing an elegant face currently set in determined lines. Rebecca, Marcus acknowledged, genuinely surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. When the board calls an emergency meeting to suspend my ex-husband, I pay attention, she replied dryly, especially when the reasons sound nothing like the Marcus Barrett I know even at his worst. Victor's composure slipped slightly. Mrs. Barrett, this is an internal matter. Ms. Barrett, she corrected coolly, and as someone who holds 12% of this company's shares, I consider it very much my business. She turned to Marcus. You look terrible, by the way. Been a rough couple of days, Marcus admitted. Thank you for being here. Rebecca's expression softened momentarily. I'm reserving judgment until I hear what's going on. Her gaze shifted to Emma, James, and Lily. Who are your friends? People who've shown me what Barrett Enterprises has really been doing in communities like Cedar Falls, Marcus replied, and who've helped gather evidence of corruption, fraud, and possibly criminal activity involving our company. Victor stepped forward, his patience visibly fraying. This is absurd. Marcus has clearly suffered some kind of breakdown. Perhaps the pressures of leadership have finally— Save it, Victor, Marcus interrupted. Let's take this into the boardroom. I believe everyone should hear what we found. The tension was palpable as they entered the impressive boardroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Denver. 8 board members sat around the massive table, expressions ranging from concern to suspicion to outright hostility. Marcus, began Harriet Williamson, the board chairwoman, a formidable woman in her 60s who had been with the company since its early days. We're deeply concerned about your behavior. These sudden accusations, abandoning your responsibilities, consorting with— She glanced dismissively at Emma, James, and Lily. These people, Marcus replied evenly, have helped uncover systematic corruption within our company. Corruption that I should have recognized sooner, but chose to ignore as long as the results satisfied us all. He placed a flash drive on the table. This contains evidence of Barrett Enterprises bribing public officials, fabricating building code violations, and employing other illegal tactics to force property owners to sell. Williamson didn't touch the drive. These are serious accusations, Marcus, against your own company. Yes, Marcus agreed. They are. And I take full responsibility for creating a culture where such actions were tolerated, even rewarded. But I didn't come here just to confess. Why did you come? Asked Douglas Chen, another long-standing board member. Marcus turned to Victor, who stood rigidly by the door. I came to expose those who took these tactics to criminal extremes, who arranged accidents for property owners who wouldn't sell, who falsified my approval on documents I never saw. He placed Lily's envelope on the table, including potentially arson that destroyed the Windsor Historical District 12 years ago. A ripple of shock passed through the room. Victor's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened where he gripped the back of a chair. That's preposterous, he said flatly. The Windsor fire was ruled accidental, as were similar incidents in Lakeside, Pinehurst, and Greenwood. Lily spoke up, stepping forward with professional confidence. All communities where Barrett Enterprises faced significant resistance to acquisition, all experiencing convenient disasters that eliminated that resistance. And who exactly are you? Williamson demanded. Dr. Lily Phillips, Ph.D. in urban planning from Cornell University. I've been documenting Barrett Enterprises' acquisition patterns for the past 3 years. James Wilson stepped forward next. James Wilson, owner of Wilson's Hardware in Cedar Falls. Recipient of fabricated building code violations designed to force me to sell at a loss. Finally, Emma introduced herself. Emma Carson. My brother was a patient at Westside Veterans Medical Center. When Barrett Enterprises purchased, it promised improvements, then closed it 3 months later for redevelopment. Victor moved to the head of the table, his composure recovered. This is all very theatrical, Marcus, but you're talking about standard business practices in property development. We acquire underperforming assets and transform them into profitable investments. That's what we do. Bribery and intimidation aren't standard business practices, Marcus countered. Neither is arson. Allegations without proof, Victor dismissed. Meanwhile, your erratic behavior, your abandonment of responsibilities, your personal crusade, these are documented facts that raise serious questions about your fitness to lead. Marcus turned to address the entire board. I'm not here to defend my position as CEO. If you want my resignation, you can have it. But first, you need to understand what's been done in this company's name, in all our names. For the next hour, Marcus, Emma, Lily, and James presented their evidence methodically. Property records, financial transfers through shell companies, inspection reports, internal documents with falsified approvals, and finally, the original Windsor development plans that specifically targeted the buildings that later burned. As the presentation concluded, the boardroom fell silent. Victor had remained standing throughout, his expression growing increasingly stony as the evidence mounted. Harriet Williamson broke the silence. If these allegations are true, and I stress, if they represent a profound betrayal of this company's stated values. Our stated values, perhaps, Marcus acknowledged, but not necessarily our practiced ones. We've all been complicit, Harriet. We praised results without questioning methods. We celebrated acquisitions without considering consequences. What exactly are you proposing, Marcus? Rebecca asked, her legal mind clearly assessing the potential fallout. First, immediate termination of Victor Reynolds and any executives involved in these practices, Marcus replied without hesitation. Second, a complete halt to the Cedar Falls development and similar projects pending review. Third, an independent investigation of all Barrett Enterprises acquisitions over the past 15 years. That would cost billions, protested Lawrence Taylor, the board's most financially conservative member. Yes, Marcus agreed. It would, as would the legal settlements that would inevitably follow. You're talking about dismantling everything we've built, Williamson said, her voice tight with disbelief. I'm talking about rebuilding it properly, Marcus corrected. With integrity and actual value creation, not exploitation. Barrett Enterprises can become something better than what it is now. Something my father would have been proud of. Victor finally spoke, his voice cold with fury. This is insanity. You're proposing corporate suicide based on the accusations of small-town nobodies with personal grudges. Emma stepped forward, her patience visibly exhausted. Those nobodies are human beings whose lives your company has destroyed for profit. Communities with histories and connections you've severed for quarterly returns. Spare me the sentimentality, Victor sneered. Development has always required clearing out the old to make way for the new. If Marcus has lost the stomach for it, that's his weakness, not a failing of our methods. Our methods, Marcus repeated quietly. That's the problem, Victor. I let people like you define our methods because it was convenient, because it was profitable. I'm done with that approach. The board members exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We need to discuss this privately, Williamson announced. Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Barrett, all of you, please step outside while the board deliberates. In the anteroom outside the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Victor stood apart from the others, occasionally checking his phone with forced casualness. Marcus found himself oddly calm, as if the simple act of speaking the truth had relieved a burden he hadn't fully acknowledged. Emma approached, speaking quietly. Whatever happens in there, you did the right thing. Finally, Marcus agreed, though it may be too little too late. It's never too late to choose a better path, she replied. My grandmother used to say that. Wise woman, Marcus observed with a small smile. She was, Emma agreed. She also said that redemption isn't found in grand gestures, but in daily choices. The real test comes after today. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. One day at a time. The boardroom door opened and Harriet Williamson emerged. We'd like to speak with Marcus alone, she announced. Victor stepped forward. As COO, I should. Just Marcus, Williamson interrupted firmly. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. The board members watched Marcus with expressions ranging from resignation to calculation to something almost like respect. We've reached several preliminary decisions, Williamson began once the door closed. Pending verification of your evidence by independent investigators, Victor Reynolds is suspended effective immediately. The Cedar Falls project is halted, and we are prepared to initiate a review of acquisitions where similar tactics may have been employed. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the concessions. And my position? You offered your resignation, Williamson reminded him. We're inclined to accept it not because we doubt your claims, but because your actions, however well-intentioned, have created significant liability for this company. I understand, Marcus replied, feeling no regret. I'll clear out my office today. That won't be necessary, Rebecca interjected. The board has agreed that you should take a leave of absence while these matters are investigated. Your future with the company will depend on the findings. I'm surprised, Marcus admitted. I expected to be shown the door immediately. Douglas Chen smiled thinly. Don't mistake pragmatism for forgiveness, Marcus. If even half of what you've presented is verified, Barrett Enterprises faces existential challenges. Your continued cooperation could be valuable. My cooperation isn't conditional on my employment, Marcus assured them. I intend to make this right, whatever my title. One more thing, Williamson added. The board expects you to personally lead the remediation efforts in Cedar Falls. Consider it a test case for your new philosophy. Marcus recognized the challenge for what it was. They were giving him the opportunity to prove his conversion was genuine, not merely expedient. I accept, he said simply. When Marcus emerged from the boardroom, the others looked at him expectantly. Victor has been suspended pending investigation, he announced. The Cedar Falls project is halted, and a broader review will begin immediately. And you, Emma asked quietly. On leave of absence, Marcus replied. with a specific assignment to make things right in Cedar Falls. James Wilson nodded with grudging approval. Sounds like you got what you wanted. Not everything, Marcus acknowledged. The real work is just beginning. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca approached. You've changed, she observed, studying her ex-husband with new eyes. For the better, I hope, Marcus replied. Time will tell, she said, a hint of her old warmth returning. Michael called me, you know. After the news broke about your suspension, he was concerned. Their son, the mention of him sent a pang through Marcus's heart. How is he? Doing well at Princeton. Still angry with you, but perhaps a little less so after recent events. She handed him a business card. My new number. When you're ready to rebuild that relationship too, let me know. Marcus accepted the card, hope kindling within him. Thank you, Rebecca. As they left Barrett Enterprises, stepping into the bright Denver afternoon, Marcus felt lighter than he had in years. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges and potential pitfalls, but for the first time in decades, he was walking a path that felt right. So, Emma asked as they paused on the sidewalk outside, what happens now? Marcus looked at his three unlikely allies, Emma, with her compassion and directness, James with his hard-earned wisdom, Lily with her meticulous research and principled stand. Now we return to Cedar Falls, he replied, and start rebuilding what my company tried to tear down. One day at a time, Emma reminded him with a small smile. One day at a time, Marcus agreed, his hand unconsciously touching the Rolex his father had given him, a reminder of where he came from, and now where he was going. Above them, the Barrett Enterprises tower gleamed in the winter sun, a monument to what he had built and what he was now choosing to transform. Behind them lay Denver, ahead the mountains, and between them the small communities like Cedar Falls that deserved better than what they had received. It wouldn't be easy. Some damage couldn't be undone. Some trust could never be fully restored. But as Marcus Barrett looked toward the mountains where Cedar Falls nestled among the pines, he knew with absolute certainty that some falls like his own on the ice outside Magnolia's diner were really just the beginning of a rise. 6 months later, Marcus stood on Main Street in Cedar Falls, watching as workers installed the new sign above what had once been a vacant storefront, Frontiersman Cafe and Community Center. The building, purchased with Marcus's personal funds and donated to a local nonprofit, would serve as both a gathering place for residents and a training facility for veterans like Emma's brother Jake, who had recently moved back to Cedar Falls to help manage the operation. It's perfect, Emma said, joining him on the sidewalk. The past months had changed her too. There was a new confidence in her, bearing a sense of purpose renewed. Eleanor thinks we're competing with Magnolias, Marcus observed with a smile. Eleanor knows better, Emma replied. She's already planning to supply her peach cobbler exclusively to us. The transformation of Cedar Falls had begun modestly, but gained momentum. The Barrett Enterprises review had confirmed Marcus's accusations, leading to Victor's termination and criminal charges against him and several county officials. The company had established a restitution fund for affected communities, with Cedar Falls as the first recipient. Marcus had resigned formally from Barrett Enterprises 3 months earlier, choosing instead to establish the Barrett Community Development Foundation. Its mission to help small towns strengthen rather than surrender their identities had already attracted significant support. Did you ever imagine this outcome when you helped me up from the ice? Marcus asked as they walked toward Magnolia's for lunch. Emma considered the question. I imagined many things, she admitted. None of them this. Life's full of unexpected turns, Marcus observed. Especially when you slip on the ice, Emma replied with a smile. As they entered Magnolia's, they were greeted warmly by Eleanor, by James Wilson, by Sheriff Miller, by all the people who had initially regarded Marcus with suspicion, but who now accepted him as part of their community. Not without reservations, trust once broken required time to heal, but with a willingness to believe in the possibility of change. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it, a photo of his son Michael, standing in front of the Princeton gates, accompanied by the message, still on for visit next weekend. Marcus smiled as he typed his reply, wouldn't miss it for anything. Some journeys began with a single step. His had begun with a fall. And as Marcus looked around at the diner where it all started, at the community he had nearly destroyed and was now helping to strengthen, at Emma, who had shown him a different way to measure success, he knew with certainty that it had been the most fortunate fall of his life. Outside, snow began to fall gently on Cedar Falls. Not the blinding storm of that fateful day, but a soft reminder that winter always gives way to spring, that endings can become beginnings, and that sometimes destiny turns on the most unexpected moments.